Hello! As the title says, this is the Fantastic Voyage. This is where I'm going to give you some hints and tips and some tools on becoming a great dungeon master. So, without further ado, we'll get into it. But first, a little bit of backstory after the cut. Okay then, so before we get into it, I'm just going to give you a little bit of backstory. When I was 12 years old, I moved back to the East Coast, and I was enrolled into a 6-year hybrid between junior high school and high school called Elizabeth Ann Seton in Manassas, Virginia. It's a traditional Catholic school. The reason I tell you this is to tell you this. I wound up making some of my closest friends when I was in high school, and I've continued to be friends with those people to this day. We loved D&D and anime and talking about video games, kind of like what gamers at large is. So I have an affinity for people like that. We liked RPGs so much that we started dabbling into tabletop RPGs. The problem was that at the time, D&D was really expensive, and the only person in our group who could really had the set so that everyone could play was they lived way far away from everyone else. So we put our heads together and we created our own hybridized system that was simplified and easier to use. And then, because we didn't like the restrictions that Dungeons & Dragons had, we created our own mythos. And I was tasked with coming up with the world eventually, because people's interests began to change a little bit. We still got together. We still get together, 2-3 times a year, every 3 or 4 months, and we play tabletop games together. So, that's a good core of friends. But basically, we created this hybridized world that combines Shadowrun and D&D and Pathfinder and a simplified system that's much easier to get into. And that's what we use. But our world is called the World of Chaos. It is a world in which there is a hierarchy of magical creatures and alignments and that type of thing. But just because someone is of a ordered alignment doesn't mean they're good. And just because someone is of a chaotic alignment doesn't mean they're bad. And just because someone is of a corrupt alignment doesn't mean they're necessarily evil. So it kind of, the world is varying shades of gray, not black and white like D&D. Especially in some of the textbook modules, it's very black and white, cut and dry. So basically, without further ado, I'll get into some tools that really help make a game work, and can turn a DM or the dungeon master from being a good dungeon master to a great dungeon master after the cut. So, as I said earlier, we're going to dive into some tools and rules that can help you go from being a great DM or a mediocre DM, or from a good DM and a mediocre DM to being a great DM. So, without further ado, I will itemize this, and each section will cover one of 5 rules to help you be a better DM. So, let's get into it after the cut. So, rule number 1 is don't have an adversarial relationship with your the party members. So if you're DMing, don't be like, well, I'm going to get them. Because the whole point is that you're their tour guide. You're the tour guide and the author. You want to bring, if this was a book, you want people to get to the last page and feel satisfied. If this is your game, your module that you've created, you want them to get through to the end. You want them to go through and see the cool battles and scenarios and encounters that you've created. So you don't try and like, I'm gonna get so and so. If someone, conversely, if you have someone in your group who's being an asshole, and trying to take over the game, there are a variety of things you can do. You can, you always have a backup plan to deal with those types of issues, which I will get into with rule number 2. So, first rule, to reiterate, is never have an adversarial relationship with the people that you're DMing for. So, now that we've gone through rule 1, it's time to move to rule 2. Rule 2 is directly related to rule 1's caveat, which was conversely, if you have someone who's trying to take over the game and or go against what you're trying to guide it into. And that is, always have a backup plan in place. Always have at least 3 or 4 backup plans. Or sub-routes or sub-scenarios. So, if you basically have your characters and you want them to get on a boat and cross the ocean to go to this island nation in order to further the story along, you should have just more than just them getting on a boat and going on this ocean voyage to get there. You should have multiple ways to get there, and entire scenarios built to support those other multiple things. And they don't have to be ultra complicated. You could have, in order to get to the island nation of Mithras, you have to, you can take a boat. The boat is the cheapest. It's 5 gold per passenger, and that includes food and drink and water. Food and water ration for a 3 to 5 day trip, okay, depending on the winds and the prevailing ocean tides and shit like that. And they're like, well, we don't have money for that. Well, there's another way to go. You can go with a disreputable fisher. You can get a fisherman to take you, but that's going to take even longer, and they're probably going to require you to help them fish. Or you can go with an even more disreputable option, which is go with some pirates. Some pirates/smugglers who are trying to smuggle something into the city. Or if you happen to have a well-moneyed crowd or a magical crowd, you can have them go for the airship route. And build, situations that support those particular scenarios. Always have a backup plan. If someone tries to flip your game or take it over or take it in a direction that you don't want it to go in, always have a backup plan, but be flexible, which leads to number 3, which will come up next. So let's get to number 3. So it's time to move to rule number 3, which is be flexible. Here's the thing. Sometimes the party of adventurers that you're DMing for will take the story in a direction that is more interesting than what you came up with. And when that happens, sometimes you're going to have to wing it. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to steer them back to where you want them to go, but you might be able to create something on the fly that's way more memorable to the party than what you came up with. So do that. Be flexible. Always be able to change your game plan, move things around if need be. You don't want to become predictable with your DM, because if an adventure becomes predictable, it loses its charm, its flair, its je ne sais quoi. So, once again, rule number 3 is be flexible, which doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't try and take and account for the needs of your party. And that leads to the 4th rule, which is coming up now. So the fourth rule that I've found that really helps to become a really good DM in a role-playing game, no matter what role-playing game you're playing, is try and tailor your adventure for who's going to be in it. And you can do this when you've been playing a long time with people, but if you're playing with new people, start off easy and then gradually work up to more epic style encounters. Give them some gimmies to get their confidence up so they understand how the game works, and then start getting into more advanced concepts as the game goes along. This is, game design 101, really. One of the most important things when doing this, when tailoring your game to a person, is to use a situational tool, a prologue tool, to determine what the advancement of your party is. So, I like to use these tools in order to determine how difficult I have to make the rest of the adventure with the prologue. And I always try to do a prologue. So basically, it lets me know the mentality of the people. I have them make their characters. It lets me know the mentality, how they're going to do what they're going to do, how they're going to act, what are they going to do. It also gives me an impetus to continue the adventure and roll into the main adventure. So a prologue would be like, okay, you got a team of 4 or 5 adventurers. They're in a main hub city in the universe you're in, and they're being paid to bring in this person. You don't necessarily tell them that the person is a fugitive or vigilante or criminal. You just say that they have to bring this guy in. When they get there, they discover, to their horror, if it's a medieval setting or like a D&D style setting, that there's all these chopped up dead bodies, and they find this guy in the middle of this village surrounded by swords, all these dead bodies, and he's got these swords with him, and he looks like he can use them. And one of these dead bodies gets up like a zombie and rushes the guy and slices it in half, and then sheathes his sword and sits back down, because he was sitting down when they came up. Now, how they approach this person is up to you. The only time I've ever seen someone get this prologue perfectly right was one time, and in my opinion, they went up to the guy and explained the situation, and they explained the situation. The guy said, "Well, I'll be happy to go with you, but there is an evil spirit that's basically corrupted this village, and the only place that hasn't been corrupted is the temple, and it basically forced these people to start killing each other. And then when all the possessed people killed the people who weren't possessed, it started jumping from body to body. And until I find the man or woman who holds the host for this demon, then I can't. I don't want to leave, because it'll break the barriers of protecting the temple, and it'll kill the people who are holed up in there." And that's like, I've had people try and fight this character. They asked me for information. I said, "Well, you open the missive that gives you the fugitive orders, and you read some of the things. This guy is a sword master." I mean, so at this point, if they're a starting group, they should know that there's no way in hell they'll be able to beat this guy. It's not going to happen. But I've had people who didn't even read the missive and rushed him and got fucking killed. Or, if not killed, horrifically injured. Luckily there's a temple close by, so, they can be healed. But still, I give them a freebie. But, I mean, this tells you the mentality of who you're dealing with. And I find that using the prologue tool, crafting situations to kind of test out the mentality of the gamers and see where you're going to have to take the story, how you're going to have to tailor it. If they're kind of the rush-in people, I start it very easy. If they are more thoughtful, then I can give them more difficult situations. So, yeah, rule number 4. Tailor your situations for who you're dealing with. Okay, this leads to number 5, which is perhaps the most important rule of all, which is have fun. I know this seems like it shouldn't need explanation, but there are a lot of people who play RPGs that take the role of DM and they aren't really having fun. And the thing is that, like I said, this goes back to the first rule. You're telling a story. You're crafting this adventure. You're crafting a story. You want to see everyone get to the end. So with that being said, have fun. It's a game. Have fun. It's meant to be fun. Have fun. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be, sometimes you can take away encounters or throw them a bone or something to help them stay alive, because at the end of the day, you want to have fun. This is not the national D&D league where they meet like 4 times a year and have these huge epic battles and official scorecards and all that shit. I think it's like 2 times a year, but I don't remember. I've never been a member myself. But have fun. This is meant to be fun. This is meant to be enjoyable. This is not, take it seriously. Don't goof around or screw up the game for other people. But have fun. Do fun. Throw in some humor. Throw in some weird things that, could be rewarding, could be weird. You never know. Not everything, like I said, has to be a life or death encounter. So the final rule is have fun. And with that, we've come to the close. We'll get to the conclusion after the cut. Okay then, so now it's time to get to the conclusion. And the conclusion is fairly simple. So in summary, these are 5 rules to help you go from being a good or mediocre DM to a great DM. So rule number 1 is don't be adversarial with the party. Don't, you're not trying to get them, you want them to get to the end of the game. Rule number 2, always have a backup plan. If things don't work out, always have at least 1 or even more, preferably more, 2 or 3 alternates to every scenario. Rule number 3, be flexible. Always be prepared to switch things out on the fly, because, that keeps it fresh and fun. Rule number 4, tailor the game to the party, not the party to the game. So basically, you're trying to make this a memorable and fun experience. You're not trying to, use something. Don't try and make things very confusing or difficult for a new set of players, and don't make things too easy for an experienced set of players. Use the tool I gave you in that particular section to help you tailor where you have to go as you move the story along. And the final rule is rule 5, just have fun. The game, D&D tabletop games are there to be fun. That's why we play them. Some people take the shit way too seriously and get really friggin' hardcore on it, but you just have fun. So, those are all 5 rules to help you become a better tabletop gamer. This is Mr. Red Fox, signing off. But before I do, I have one last thing to tell you. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will be doing the BS Busters After Dark show, the first of its kind. It's a test kitchen for something that was kicked around in gamers at large, and we want to see if it could be implemented. So it's going to be vastly different than anything we've ever seen before. And it's going to be vastly different. There's going to be a lot of real talk. People might get sick. I don't care. It's going to be fun. The link to get to that to get to that particular podcast is above my head, so use the Q&A section. Have fun. With that being said, good day.